Why is freedom of information important? Freedom of information is important because governments often misbehave, and freedom of information keeps them on their toes. It helps citizens keep an eye on what governments are doing or not doing, how they're spending money or not spending money, whether they're immersed in scandal or not. So it's an important check on the power of government. Governments can do a lot of benign things, but they can also do a lot of horrendous things. And freedom of information gives a tool to ordinary citizens to keep watch on the negative things that governments do. Well, I don't accept that journalists are not using it as frequently. I think the statistics that we've been given by government are misleading and poorly collected and poorly analyzed. So I'm not quite convinced that journalists are abandoning the act. I think there may be a small bit of that, but this is another problem with freedom of information in Canada, especially the Access to Information Act, is we don't have proper statistics to gauge where it's going, where it's coming from, whether it's performing properly. The government collects very minimal information about how it works. I don't think it's in their interest to collect proper statistics because everyone would see how it's declined. So when we say the recent statistics suggest that journalists are not using it, I don't quite accept that that's true. I think I think those are a bit bogus, those statistics. However, it's certainly harder and harder for journalists to use it, and I think it's become more frustrating, and I think we're seeing fewer stories because of the difficulties of using the system. So while journalists may be filing the same number of requests that they have in the past, their hit rate is going down and down and down. So I think there is that phenomenon happening for sure. And I think a new generation is coming along that finds freedom of information difficult to use. The freedom of access to information in this country was born in an age before the internet. And we have a whole generation of journalists who've grown up on the internet. And the act and the way the process works reflects that dinosaur age when you mailed in checks, you used the post office to get your request in there. This generation expects to be able to do things online, and rightly so. It's more efficient and it's less expensive for government, in fact. But the system hasn't changed. So I think there's a whole new generation of journalists that finds it frustrating in a lot of ways, even in the simple mechanics of using it. Well, I can tell you about my own experience using access to information. I started back in 1983 when the law came into effect. It was an experiment in my own case. No one actually knew in Canada how effective it might be or how it might work, what stories might come out of it. And I was impressed right from the start at how powerful a tool it was for journalism. I was able to break stories regularly over the years. I wrote 4 books that relied heavily on the Access to Information Act. So I was quite impressed by the law as a tool for ordinary citizens and, of course, for journalists as well. And in this country, we've had some pretty amazing stories emerge from use of the Act. One of the first ones that comes to mind is the sponsorship scandal, where the Liberal government spent sponsorship money in Quebec and actually hived off some of that money illegally to the Liberal Party and to others. That story was broken through an Access to Information Act request. And the Liberals have never recovered from that scandal, I think. And now the Liberals are, in danger of slipping off the map. And you can trace that back to an Access to Information request. So it's a very powerful tool for flushing out scandal and misbehavior. And we could talk of dozens of examples. The problem is, it's as I said before, it's just becoming more and more difficult to use and to use effectively. Has Canada's Information Act improved or deteriorated? It's deteriorated clearly. The Act has not had a major overhaul or any serious overhaul since it was passed in the summer of 1982. It came into force in 1983. There have been numerous parliamentary committees that tried to do it. There have been numerous governments that said they would do it. There have been lobby groups pressing for change, but over that entire period, there hasn't been an overhaul of it. And I can't imagine any law that was born in the age before the internet working properly in the modern age. And of course, it doesn't work properly. But governments, it's not in their interest to make it function properly. I think it's in their interest to see it kind of fade out of use. And so there's just been no incentive for any government to you know, get a grip here and change the act to what it should be for a modern democracy like Canada's. The failing grade, I think it was F minus, if I'm not mistaken. I think it was too generous. I think this government should be expelled from school. I don't even think they should be graded. There's clearly been, since the Conservative government was elected as a minority in 2006, there's clearly been a more rapid deterioration of the operation of the Act. That's not to say that the previous governments were friends of freedom of information or worked to see it implemented effectively. But since 2006, for a whole bunch of reasons, this government has been especially successful at undermining the principles of FOI. One of the reasons they've been successful is because they were in opposition for many years. The Reform Party became the official opposition in 1997, and through its various permutations into the Canadian Alliance and finally into the Conservative Party, while in opposition, they were big users of the Act. They were effective users of the Act. And that's how it should work. Opposition parties should avail themselves of freedom of information to hold the government to account, just like journalists should. The problem is they discovered all the loopholes in the Act when they used it in opposition. And I believe that when they came into power as a minority government of Canada in 2006, and they won 2 more terms, they were able to exploit those loopholes quite effectively. One of the loopholes is cabinet documents. Cabinet documents are not covered by the Act. They're not even covered. It's not that they're exempt or they can be blacked out. The Act doesn't even cover them. This government has expanded its definition of cabinet records to include whole ranges of documents that used to be obtained easily under the Act. So there's one example of how, while in opposition, they learned of the loopholes in the Act, and while in government, they exploited those loopholes to their own advantage once in power. So F minus, that's generous, I think. What advice would I give to a journalist filing an access to information request for the first time? I would say, first of all, don't file 1 request, file 20 requests, because it's going to take that many for you to get a story back. Myself, I'm experienced in using it. I probably have to file 10 requests to get 1 story. That's how the system has broken down. So my first piece of advice would be, don't just file 1, file a lot, because you're going to be very frustrated. If your hopes are set on that 1 request, you're going to find your hopes dashed very quickly. And the other thing I would say is persevere. We all get frustrated. Even experienced users like myself get frustrated. Don't let that frustration stop you. Be a pit bull about it. Dig in and insist on your rights, and don't give up, because it's exactly what a government wants. They want it to be so difficult, you'll give up and go away. So perseverance and file lots. Canada, we do not have enough organizations who are lobbying for change, who are pressing the government for change, who are calling them out on their bad behavior with FOI. And CJFE is doing a wonderful thing, and we need more groups like this one to take up the cause. I think without vocal opposition out there, I don't think anything can change. I think we don't have enough lobby groups or groups interested in FOI or journalism groups raising hell about these issues. And the more conferences, panels, releases, report cards, whatever, I think in the long run it does make a difference. I look at the United States, and there's a very strong freedom of information lobby, and it's composed of multiple groups. And the freedom of information system in the United States works quite well, and it's much better used than ours is. And I think that's because they've created a culture down there of FOI. We just don't have that here yet. So CJFE, more power to you.